So my name is Roger Horton. I am the director of Maker programs for Schools That Can, based in New York City, but working with our teams in Chicago, in Pittsburgh, and Newark, and making our work available nationally now through the joy of our virtual context and our moving our programs online. And I'm really happy to have a chance to host our moderator and our speaker today for this session, XR and the Future of Learning. You're going to be hearing today from Maya Georgieva, the Director of Education Futures at the XREALITY Center at the New School right here in New York City. And again, we are really privileged and pleased to have Maya. Maya has spoken multiple times at South by Southwest and many other venues and worked with schools around New York City on virtual reality, augmented reality, and how those can be tools for K-12 education. Where do they fit in, and how is that changing with COVID-19? What's going on? That world is changing just like everything else. So we're excited to have Maya here, and please welcome Maya. And our moderator today is going to be Stephen Gilman, the founder and executive director of MakerState, which is a fantastic partner of Schools That Can, and we've had a great and long relationship with MakerState. So we're really excited to have Stephen here with us as well. And I want you to highlight everyone to watch the polls over to your right on the polls tab. You're in a few moments going to see the first of 3 questions come up. So keep your eye on the polls, please, as Stephen begins to open us up. And those polls are going to be helpful as we move forward. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Stephen to just say a few words. And again, watch the polls, any questions in the chat, and we'll talk again. I'll be with you again later in the session.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, Roger. It's so good to be joined together here for this very special session on XR and VR. We thank Maya for joining us today, and so glad to see some friends and colleagues in the chat already there. If you haven't said hi already, please do put your name there and the name of your program and something that you might be working on. Might be useful for those of us that to get to know each other in a little bit. Just to note that you can click on somebody's icon and chat them privately if you want to exchange messages that way, and contact information. We'll be taking questions all throughout Maya's presentation, which will be about 25-30 minutes. Should have plenty of time. And Naved and I, who you see there in the chat, will be compiling your questions, and so that we can ask Maya when she is done with her presentation. So without further ado, Maya.
Thank you, Roger and Stephen, for this kind introduction, and I'm excited to be here and excited to see the chat. And I just noticed somebody from Carson, and I'm very familiar with that because I, for many years, have been on an expert panel for the Horizon Report on Higher Education, and similarly always looked into the Carson, the K-12 report as a way of shedding light into what's to come to us in higher education. And I do spend most of my time in both working with college students and faculty, as well as K-12 students and teachers. And I'm always really excited to actually engage with this population, because the conversations and the questions are so much more intimate. I tend to think that teachers have much closer to their students than I think sometimes college professors are, and that creates a great place to start. I couldn't possibly start this presentation without sharing a personal story that to be here today, and I know many of you know Roger Horton, and he's been, putting together this incredible program for our working with our speakers for a month, but like many months we do students and teachers and the last 3 days of amazing schedule. But I met Roger in a small town in Bulgaria when he came to teach English about 20 years ago. and where he inspired many students. And so I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Roger and his family, who opened a whole new horizon for me to come to America and have the opportunity to have liberal arts education and beyond. And here I am today to speak about the future of learning. So these personal stories, this personal impact that all of us can make are so important, and even more important in times of global pandemic. As we try to make a difference in the world, I think sometimes it starts with very small and personal stories. So I had to take this opportunity to share that. So the future of learning. So I lead the center, the XREALITY Center at the new school. And this is, sometimes I get this question, XR, when is this coming? Who is doing it? Who's interested in getting there? And this is a picture from the World Science Festival, which takes place in New York City, usually, actually at the end of May last year, where my center and my students put together a workshop. And these were the participants sitting online, waiting for hours, actually in some cases, to participate in this workshop. And here's one of our students onboarding these students and describing to them what XREALITY is. It was a hot summer day, and these students and their parents and just the teachers' amount of traffic and curious questions we got. And what these young students get to do with us is we actually did indeed put headsets and took them to tour the International Space Station. So last year, in the span of this day, we were able to take more than 100 middle school, I think ages 7 to 20, and some parents to tour the International Space Station through the lens of the headset. And this was our youngest participants. And I know some of you may say, oh my gosh, no. But if your father brings you to the World Science Festival and he wants you to try it, this is Mia, and we put a chair for her, and she refused to put the chair. She actually wanted to see it. We worked with her and one of our volunteers to have her, a glimpse. And I think that 20 years later, this young child may or may not remember that this happened. And we work within the center, actually oftentimes engaging with a number of students and schools from across the New York City area as they come. I know we live in difficult times, but at some point in the future, I do invite you to come over and visit us in the lab at the new school on Fifth Avenue. So what we set to do at the center is really experiment and explore. And we have, particularly in the parts of school of design, we have young designers and storytellers and makers and performers who we actually really sit and using methods like some of you do, design thinking and storyboarding, and think about what would that mean? What would mean to reimagine education? Having the opportunity to use these new emerging technologies, augmented, virtual, and mixed reality. So, of course, we focus that on that, learning is a social process. And as John Dewey said, all genuine learning comes through experience. And now we have the opportunity to take students to places where perhaps we normally wouldn't be able to do, and give them the opportunity to experience things. And this is a driving mood for us. It's the opportunity that this actually creates opportunity for us in education to explore a new canvas, if you will. And then the other cornerstone, because I often am asked by educators, how is this helping us in education, is this idea of the process of discovery. And one of the people that I look up when I think about introducing technology in education, Slimo Popper. And I'm sure some of you know him very well. And the idea that technology is not something just to put in the hands of students or just develop some particular skill set. But technology is an opportunity to create, to test hypotheses, to run experiments, And this is also a guiding principle as I look into what XR can do for education. All right. So I want to make sure that we're on the same page. I'm going to look up the polls, and hopefully you're answering the polls to have an idea, in a sense, where we stand with who, how we're looking in terms of your participation at this point. And I can see that some people are sampling and trying things, but I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and we'll very briefly talked about what are we talking here about. So virtual reality, yes, you put on a headset and you're transported in a completely digital environment, oftentimes rendered on computer platforms. And then 360 video is something that actually oftentimes you can experience on a mobile phone or tablet, and then put in a Google Cardboard, just as it's on a picture, and some of you probably are familiar with that. And see through that, and whether it's a field trip to look up the giant collider in Switzerland or the Great China Wall, it's a very easy way to do a guided field tour with them. And then augmented reality. And today, augmented reality is, again, something we experience mostly to the phone. It's the first step. And soon enough, maybe in 3 or 4 years, the glasses will appear. Of course, there'll be lots of questions around that. But today we still have the mobile phone. And I'll share some augmented reality, I think, sort of applications that perhaps you may consider. So being able to discover things, digital objects on top of the physical world. And then we go into something called mixed reality. Yes, the language gets more complicated. It's a term that has been, kind of like really brought in a lot more recent years, probably like 10 years in the making, really adopted through devices that are something that you put on your headset, but a headset that it actually has a see-through glasses. So very much like these glasses right now here, which is the Magic Leap. And so what it does, it has also, in addition to that, little cameras and sensors. So this headset will scan your room. And as you place digital objects into the world, they'll understand sort of the geography of your room. And so they will appear into scale in a very natural way, and they will interact with that sort of geography. And what do I mean by that? And I have like a simple example, which we sometimes bring to our students. So imagine I have a digital cat walking into my couch. And as the cat reaches the end of the couch, instead of just continuing in thin air, the cat will be aware that it simply needs to jump down on the floor in order to continue. So just an idea to give you how do we describe this tool, describe this field, how do we talk about some of this virtual and mixed reality continuum. And this is what really it is. We're on a continuum. As our devices become better, so is the opportunity to do things with them, and so is the language continues to evolve. So for those of you who just kind of like puzzled or see this language emerging, that is partly why. And then my center has adopted this idea of XREALITY, or extended reality. And so what it means is this idea that it's the X. It's almost the, again, the continuum of what it can be. So that is where XR comes from. All right. So XR for learning. And you'll see some things here that you'll recognize. But I wanted in this first 20 minutes to really kind of flag some applications some of you may played with, heard of, but something that I think continues to be relevant. And so many of you may or may not have seen these in your labs, like Z-Space and the merge cube. And the merge cube is that little cube. It works really well with younger children as well, where you can actually use your phone and run a number of different applications, from STEM games to science content to storytelling, to even building your own games today. They even have actually open up some creating tools. So the merge tool, every time we brought it, sort of the teachers that are working with early childhood, sort of early elementary school, middle school, this is a great tool to get started. But I have to say that the storytellings is so good. Like we have high school students doing this, kind of going through these non-linear stories for minutes at a time. So I want to also bring sometimes when we talk about that, it's good to also have a reference point. So another wonderful platform which has been growing has been CoSpaces. And CoSpaces has kind of moved into a number of different areas. And yes, I know there's a kind of premium and a free, and oftentimes the premium is a step up. But it does give an opportunity to create worlds, to actually tell stories. As you can see, it works on a the Google Cardboard, which can easily fit, where the phones can easily fit. It works on a desktop. It works on a tablet. And now they've opened up the platform to coding that is very similar, like Scratch. So there's even advanced features. I love the idea that students can build their own 3D stories so simply, and then being able to render them and run them in their own home. And more recently, they've added the AR version. So you can actually drop them right next into their spaces and the living room. So something to definitely at least look at and try and see on some level. So the other project, so wanted to really recently see that, which is really an interesting project from MelKids, where it merges sort of the making, the tactile, physical things of making, and then putting that making with augmented reality into life. So let's very quickly watch this. It's a very brief video. So you can see here, it's one of those kits that you can actually create it. And then following that, you can see the dynamics of it, again, come to life and bring different characters. Just as I think, a great illustration of creating something with your hands, and then, as I mentioned, seeing how it can work. Now, some of you here, maybe administrators, principals, looking at this, well, how do I get this in my lab? And one of the questions, the poll questions were there. So there are emerging some kits, and some of you may participate even in the Google Expeditions program, the Lenovo VR Classroom. VR Classroom 2 now is coming back from Lenovo in a different version with a different headset later this fall. There's Classroom VR and Nearpod VR. And sometimes this is a solution. I know this is these are paid solutions, but in some ways they made it very simply of packaging a tool set, the kit with the headsets. And so that gives an opportunity to have to basically bring it to a makerspace, or bring it in some space. And yes, we'll talk about hygiene and all that comes to the live we're living today. But these solutions are starting to exist, and perhaps it could be incorporated in a grant or some other programs in some ways. Another just wonderful. If you haven't tried it, this is your weekend project that I want you to try. Wanda Scope. It's free. Let's just watch it, and then we'll talk after.
Wanda Scope. Oh, good, you're here. We better get going now. Grandma has a lot of seeds for us to plant. Can I touch it? That's cool. What is he from?
What you got there? I'll get crushed to death by the thousands of tons of water. Look at that. That's crashing down below me.
Is that a good idea at your age? Age ain't nothing but a number. Here we go. Time to blow away some wrinkles. Quick, Grandma's. He doesn't know where I am. No, Red, don't go away.
There she is. Look at her. Motorcycle.
There it is. You found it.
We did it.
So Wanda Scope is created by actually an agency, of the VR agency with really serious, very much cinematic VR, one of the pioneering agencies in California and with them. And now last year, they've created these several stories for children, which is just so amazing and touching and really give an opportunity to engage with this technology, play a role, be part of it. A great example, whether you're trying to make stories or understand the power of this medium, try it. And as I mentioned, it's free on the app and stores, and it's a great delight to kind of understand is how engaging some of these tools could be. Now I want to move a little bit quickly and cover a couple of solutions that are again, exist in the space that takes this to a whole nother level, Lobster. And Lobster allows these STEM and science simulations like sort of almost expeditions, almost stories for students to engage with. And sometimes it's understanding the hazards and the safety in a lot, but other ones, they have actually a real narrative behind them. Meaning that, the students actually, in the process of testing and uncovering the science principles, they actually have to solve a case. So a great use of both games and learning and
Hi, think we're having some technical difficulties here, as you can see, but we just refreshing the page there. I think if Maya can refresh her page. Yeah, Naved's asking a question there in the chat. If anyone else can share their experiences with VR as we bring Maya back.
Hey, Stephen. Yeah, we just lost Maya momentarily. I'm sure she'll be back. There she is. Welcome back, Maya. No problem.
So just give me a tip where we got cut off.
That's a good question. It was just not too long.
It was about 1 minute ago, just after you showed the video of the augmented reality.
In the after the augmented reality, yeah, in there.
You guys catch Lobster?
Yes, Lobster too, yeah.
And did we talk about the experience in literature?
We were just getting into that, I think.
Yeah. Okay, the Anne Frank experience. So as I mentioned, this experience is, obviously for maybe kind of moving students in the high school level. It's in virtual reality, experience on the headset, like the Oculus Quest, Oculus or HTC Vive. It's a great way to for students to experience, what this family experienced during World War II. And the whole story is you enter the story, and it is almost you entering her journal. And it's a great place for reflection, for introducing students to a place in time where they didn't necessarily witness. And this is a great place for VR, I think, where sometimes it can teleport and transport it to places and really almost work as a time machine. Another experience which I have received very much similar feedback is from the civil rights movement. It's actually developed by a faculty. And as students, basically are sitting on the street as much as it's taking place, it gives you a completely different perspective of what it is to be on the picket lines. There are lots of other things we can talk about in terms of the visual, interactive, and the dynamics and the behaviors in these places. But oftentimes when students take off the headset, they just so want to ask so many questions. And I personally have witnessed time and time again in our lab. So almost moving towards the end so we can open up the questions. But the next one is I am in this field because I believe that our students are the next generations of creators and architects and storytellers and engineers. And so as I looked into this application and this opportunity with them, I always look for how are we, giving our students new tools to create. As the world changes, as the workplace is changing, so are basically what are the opportunities for our students to experience that. And so a couple of different ones, Toothbrush and Google Blocks, these are actually being able to create in VR, 3D objects, and then use them in various other platforms. And the other one, many of you may have heard, if you're interested in this field, about Unity. But what Unity did about a year and a half ago, opened up Unity Playground, which is really targeted for a younger generation, for the younger students, where it's a much more like a building blocks, similarly like blocks, very Minecraft kind of type of environment. But Playground gives you almost like, you can drag in the behavior, you can drag these building blocks and create a games very simply. And has a lot of free assets that students can really immediately get their hands on. So I know we can, move forward this conversation without talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. I know this whole forum for 3 days has touched multiple times on these topics. And I know many of you are saying these devices are expensive. How do we get them in our schools? How do we get students to use them? I think that's all valid. But what's equally important is to think that these are the tools of the future. And we actually have a responsibility to ensure that these communities that don't have access get to have access. Otherwise, what we've just experienced with social media would feel like nothing. What virtual reality can simulate experience, artificial intelligence is coming. If our students are not aware of the power of these technologies, they will be completely left out. So it's actually incredibly important to find a way to introduce students and these communities to these tools. And not just to introduce them, but for me, the realization of this is for them to be able to create. The only way you understand the dynamics of what technology's impact on society is if you are a creator. So lots of conversations about. And then my final slide. It's one of my favorite slides. I often look at it myself. So this is, as we're preparing to launch another rover in Mars, I believe in 22, 23, now scientists from across the globe are using mixed reality headsets, and what you're seeing this, to meet in a third place, rendered by all the graphics and all the data that we've accumulated about the terrain and surface of Mars. So they can actually drop the digital version of a rover and collectively beam into this third place and engineer it together. And I think oftentimes we're asked to think, reimagine education, reimagining the future of work. And I think this sums it up. This is what I believe is one of the possible versions of the future can look like. All right, so again, you can find some of our work at the XR Center at the newschool.edu. I also am the co-founder of digitalbodies.net, where we post a lot of different stories and reflection on this field. So feel free to connect there. But here, I want to open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Maya. What a great presentation, and what a sort of wild, cutting-edge frontier this is for. I'm sure everyone who's watching and listening minds are racing with possibilities for their students, and a lot of ideas about what we may have already done, but so much more here ahead of us. I wanted to ask our viewers here to think about a question, and I'm going to give a question to you, Maya. But think about a question, what part of your learning or what lesson or unit from your year-long studies or courses that you delivered, what might you like to bring to AR, VR first? So if you could think of that as Maya is talking to us more here, and put that in the chat. What's one project that you might like to bring to AR, VR first? So Maya, you shared that great John Dewey quote, all genuine learning comes through experience. And what an inspiration that has been before and after these great new technologies. What role do you see students having in crafting and sharing their own XR learning experiences?
Yes. I mean, ultimately, I think there are two, really strong points. And the first point coming to just experiencing that technology comes from experience, witnessing something, stepping into it. And I think oftentimes that creates a high level of engagement, of wanting to discover more, wanting to know more. And I don't mean just about the technology, but a particular process. If you actually are able to go deep down in the cell and witness something that normally we don't get to witness, I don't know, the exchange of proteins, that can actually open a whole nother way to think about that. And so for me, I think where we can take students and demonstrate and really use that spatial component and visual fidelity, as well as, the idea that these things are moving, pieces and parts and making a whole is great. But as I mentioned, I'm really incredibly passionate about the idea of students as creators. So I actually feel that the first opportunity after you have something more of exposure and sharing, and something that students can do at home, in their living room through their mobile phone or tablet often, it's the idea to empower them with tools to create. Give them an opportunity to create their story. Lots of these little tools, applications, and we mentioned some of the kind of really ones that have been around and now I think are stable and have some traction, but there are different. Obviously, I didn't mention all of them, and there are other opportunities where you can bring students to create things and share what they experience today, share something about their community, share something about something they've learned as a way that it can be actually shared to another mobile phone, and another students can view it through that lens as well.
Thank you, Maya. That really is I think it's the crux of our schools that can mantra here is real world learning and connecting students and teachers for that type of hands-on experiential learning. So we're still looking at our chat here for questions of projects that you might like to ask Maya about how you might like to dip your toe into this technology and begin using it where you might not have before, or explore some new areas there on the cutting edge of this technology. Norton had a question there. Maya, are there any K-12 XR products being done virtually during the coronavirus crisis?
So, projects. So I think that there are different schools have placed this in a different place. So sometimes it can exist in some of the STEM curriculums, but oftentimes can exist also as an extracurricular in the afternoon, or as some of the maker or innovation labs type of activities. I know I have served as a judge to see some games, which, students continue to develop at home and were able to share. And we as, coaches and judges were able to also see through, yes, Zoom-like environment like this in similar environments and offer feedback. So, some of these projects, very much able to continue to work. And whether it's GoSpaces or another application, if you adopt it, I think the tablet, I think that AR is at the moment a little easier. Otherwise, you probably have to be thinking, how you are making sure that the student has at least a Google Cardboard at home, which they're available on Amazon and other retailers. And, something that once that you have a Google Cardboard, then you can bring that content into 360 video virtual reality. I know lots of students in schools have experience with 360 cameras, especially in that sort of environmental component about their community. These projects can, some of them perhaps can continue.
That's great.
In some
thank
fashion.
you. And this is all about, wading in and trying new things here. I just to follow up on that. You're recommending Google Cardboard. I'm just reminded here. I have some merged cubes right here in the MakerSpace, and I think I got this. It was probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I don't think there was many applications for it. But while you were talking, I just looked it up again, and there's tons of phone-based applications, tablet-based applications for the Merge. I'll put the link in the chat. This is a $20 item right here. So that might be a nice entry point. I think Google Google Glass, is that what you said, Maya? Google Cardboard was one of the early items to come out to make AR and VR more affordable. Any other recommendations there, Maya, or anything from our audience of technologies that you've used? Please put those in the chat.
Yeah, and by the way, those have now gone, I think, for $8, and the Google Cardboard is between $3 and $10, really, depending on. They're much more kind of available. I would recommend, some of these Quas VR and some of the other actually projects where they actually sell the big suitcase of the kids. They've shared quite a few lessons plans and learning opportunities for a range actually of students. I will use that as a starting point. And I think even with very simple, these expeditions like 360 videos, it's more really of looking at the right place and the right time. And I have to mention that I don't envision, whether it's the college classroom or learning environment or the K-12, that we actually put students in the headsets all the time. I think it's just there's a right time and place. So I think, some of those reference points are easy. CoSpaces have also shared some lessons plans. But I also will ask you to think through and work with your students. And engage them in a design thinking type of activity to see where they see it. And one of the things I often try to avoid to see this as just a better toy, right? What we want to do with this is really
so good. Thank you, Maya. Della Weaver has a question. Is there any K-8 lessons on how to explore creating virtual businesses that would benefit an underserved community?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So oftentimes I've seen that in a way of, as some of you may be familiar, incubators or similar accelerators, sometimes linked to a university, or some of the EdTech partnerships. And those on occasion have served that purpose. And I certainly have, sort of been on, as I mentioned before, a number of schools where, particularly students creating their own content. Games for Change, another organization in New York City, which usually hosts their conference at the new school. but this year will be virtual. But yes, Games for Change also have a number of different accelerators, challenges, competitions where I think it may
That's
be an
really
opportunity
fun
for
stuff
something
there. I
like
was
that.
just a judge on the 2 recent Games for Change competition, the general one for social impact games. So some really cutting edge stuff there. And then the student competition, which just happened last week. And those are really some entry level games that teachers are using apps like from code.org to enable students to create games to wade into immersive experiences that they can share with other students. Highly recommended. Put that link in the chat there. Another question from Tyler Batone, Maya. What skills or products would be recommended for early elementary school to best prepare students for later success in these fields?
Right. I think that anywhere you see 3D modeling, understanding sort of space, 3D spaces. I think, as I mentioned, I don't subscribe. These are the only tools out there that I mentioned on platforms. Certainly there are others. But I think that looking into understanding, sort of that that 3D modeling experiences starting on a very simple level. Sometimes it helps something like CoSpaces because you have the assets. I was surprised how simple the Unity 3D games are, and so once we get up to 12, 10 to 12 and above, that's a great place. But probably starting with some of the most simple apps where students can just really drag and drop, add components, assets, and then and visuals kind of see them pop.
Some of the products and technologies that you've used, I think, like the Merge Cube, where students can view and experience first, but then perhaps later be involved in creating with that same technology. Seems to make sense. Wanted to ask another question here, because you have played such a pivotal role in bringing AR and VR to K-12 in particular. What role do you see AR and VR having in disrupting K-12 education and bringing us as educators for our kids new types of learning experiences that can perhaps bring them greater agency?
I mean, usually that is best expressed in a couple of things: the idea of presence and storytelling. And I think looking for the opportunity for students to have agency, to being able to tell their own stories, and ultimately evoking a greater sense of presence, whether it's within their community, within their learning community, and others, and as well the agency of being able to create something and share it with the world. I mean, that is ultimately, I think, one of the opportunity here, where once you're a creator, you have this kind of digital component, and we see our students, all ages spending more time. But the idea that you can create something and share it with the world, I think that's the real impact.
Fascinating.
Happens.
That's I think making me think of storytelling going back to early hominids, just communicating across the fire. And maybe that was the original virtual reality, in immersing each other into places and experiences that weren't necessarily happening in front of our immediate senses. And that's a wonderful comparison.
Yes.
Would you recommend any ways for teachers and students to begin into the journey of AR and VR learning without using any technology at all, perhaps?
I think we probably will be aided by tablets and mobile. Yeah, I think that it's important for students to see it. I mean, I've been privileged because I've been doing this for, it's coming to be a decade. I started very, very early when literally, it was somewhat shocking when I bring it into sort of educational circles and discussions. But it's the opportunity to pick a couple of resources, use them at that opportunity as a field trip day or as the sort of innovation day or some whatever fits your school or learning community moment, and watch the students, and then just do a brief introduction and watch them play. And this is going to give you an insight about this much greater. I hope I inspire you today, but this will be your aha moment, just as has been my aha moment for many years. The moment when students put their hands on these devices, they put them on, they take them off, and then they start talking. And sometimes they say, why do we still have to do these other things? There's also, it is very personalized. Most of the time, when you are in these environments, and I know there's also a critique about that, and I think it's fair on both sides. But the idea that you sit through that experience, and they oftentimes a guided experience. So you have the idea of somebody like a coach or a mentor talking through some of these mal education or some of the other components, and you really walk through them and feel like this is an experience that is kind of crafted for you, that you are on that mission. And I think it is definitely an opportunity in the future for us to think about where is the space. And as I mentioned, I see that as an opportunity to do some of the things that perhaps we did today not as effectively, to open up the other space, to do these conversations with our students about social emotional learning, about things that they need us as mentors and coaches.
So we're going to ask Maya to refresh again. We lost you there, Maya. I think she's going to refresh and come back here. Sorry about that. Any other questions that you have for Maya? I would really encourage you, if you have a lesson or a unit that you think could bring some new excitement with the addition of AR, VR, please, Maya, please share that in the chat there. So any lessons or units that you think might be a good candidate to include here. Let's ask Maya while we've got her here for another 10 minutes. So we're back with you, Maya. Oh, she's still a little bit frozen there. Maya, if you might refresh again. And one of the questions that we want to ask Maya when she comes back is, what role might VR have in democratizing technology use for 21st century learning? And we're going to, Roger's on the job there, bringing Maya back. Hi, Maya. You're live again.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. So we just wanted to ask another question there about the democratizing effect of AR in VR. Maybe one comparison could be with the proliferation of YouTube content and YouTube channels and content creators. And I think that's probably had a lot of influence over the golden age of television. And a lot of our favorite shows now come from maybe the TV industry reaching out to a wider group of creators to bring, you don't have to come up through and be published anymore or be handpicked. You get viewers and you gain an audience, and then you might become a writer on a show. Likewise, what might be similar paths in the AR VR world to enable students to begin creating and become major voices of their own in this genre?
Yes, I mean, I think some of the tools that are for professional creators exist for everybody, and luckily a lot of these, both VR and AR apps, have actually educational platforms, educational entry point for getting started. And so, just as I mentioned, the Unity Playground, the Google Blocks, the Google Tilt Brush, where you can create 3D objects and bring them in. There are various other applications like Blipper or and similar on the mobile apps, that Torch AR and others, where basically you can start at a very minimal basis, like really sort of experiencing some things. I think another app is Zappar. They have done some things in education. Being able to augment everything. The idea of being able to even augment something like a poster. I mean, that's a very actually common use case of, now not only are you able to put your poster, but you're able to augment the poster with moving images and video and others, and demonstrate some of the principles or some of the ideas behind it. And the good things about AR is that just as you can scan things from paper, you can scan it from your computer screen, and they'll pop and work, and you can work with them. So I think that it gives some space for experimentation. And a lot of these tools have some starting model where students can experiment for free. And yes, we're starting to see maturing some of these platforms, understanding what the needs are, and just as some of the other sort of ed tech services are creating different models for exploration.
That sounds great. We're still taking questions here, and we'd like to know about projects that you're working on, that you have worked on in your classroom, or ones that you might envision for working on with these new technologies. Maya, another question. What role do you think AR, VR has in creating more autonomous learning, independent learning of students? We teachers can't be in every room with every student all the time. So what role does it have in autonomous learning?
I mean, I think the idea that you can, create now imagine something like a study guide or any version of a tutorial that can, actually be just in time augmented. And so, that is one way of where I mentioned this idea of just that some of these experiences do feel very personalized because you are moving along and on your own, and even if you're guided, you very much focus. Some of the things that we are looking into the lab is actually exactly that, the idea to calm down, the idea to focus. We have students that come sometimes and do certain things in the afternoons, and they feel like they share with us, I should start my day with this. It just gets me so focused. Like I am actually focused on creating whatever I'm creating. And today, this is how it feels. These experiences continue to evolve, and we continue to kind of experiment with them. But in some of these contexts, they can be it's very different. People cone on isolations, but sometimes having that space on your own is actually.
Yes, agreed. Schools That Can is committed, as we know, to teacher professional development and best practices supports. What role do you think AR and VR has in helping teachers to hone and improve their craft?
Oh, there's a great project, I believe, in Penn State, where pre-service teachers, and as you know, we all would like our teachers and as students are going to graduate school to have as much opportunity to be in the physical classroom and practice and basically hone their skills. But there are some applications where you can actually teach to what appears to be avatars. And if you're not making a lot of eye contact, or if your kind of speech pattern changes, these avatars actually emote. And some will do as much as bring their own phones and start looking at their phones. And sometimes there will be simulated experience where they'll misbehave to give pre-service teachers the opportunity to experience what it is, could be, some real questions and concerns and challenges in the classroom. So there's lots of experimentation in that space of looking into how similarly like medical or science simulations, how these kind of simulations can give teachers more agency, more confidence to really work with a diversity group of students.
I wanted to follow up on Norton's question there about AR, VR projects in the time of COVID. We're kind of, it happened so fast, and we, one day we were in school and thinking that life was normal, and the next day we're all at home and doing the best we can to carry our students along and keep the learning going through Zoom and other platforms. What could you just circle back and touch on just one more time on ways that we might bring in AR, VR, or some type of or similar technologies into a Zoom type experience where we're not there together? We may not have consistent and universal devices across all users. Can you comment on that just one more time?
Yes. So I will just share with you an experience where I found actually productive over Zoom, and you can sense my sort of tone here in the question, because I don't think that all of these experiences in video conferences are ultimately as productive. But the good news is that these are, as you work with digital tools and digital platforms, they oftentimes have a web component. And so not only do they have a web component, and you can share them on the screen, but you can actually share the agency of your mouse with somebody. So one of the best experience for me earlier this spring was as I was teaching our college students, that in these summerville mentorship on one-on-one sessions, I can actually take over the mouse and actually guide them through certain processes and show them things. And so it's very interactive, and it's actually when you actually want to pay attention really to the screen, and you can offer that immediately. So I would suggest that all of these projects that have some web interface, yes, that we experience differently, probably looking through the camera of the phone once they're ready. But on the other hand, even something like Zoom can give you a very interesting space to navigate and work with students, and particularly in that interactive component where you take or they take over the mouse and they can drive your computer, or you can drive their computer in order to kind of guide them through.
Thank you. We're about a minute out here. If we could just sneak in a couple extra questions. Roger had a great question with the preface, our democracy seems to need some help right now. And he asks, does VR AR have a role in the process of engaging with government, democracy, and community building around activism?
Yes. All right. So I think as I mentioned, one of the things, that it's ultimately the way students understand the underlying power of technology. It's just that some of our colleagues are teaching them how to code, and others are teaching them how to think critically. And creating a new technologies is so important, because it is ultimately how we understand. New media, we're saturated, we'll continue, this digital world, we're not going to go away. But what we need to make sure that, to be fully, citizens of the world, of the next generation, have to understand how these technology work together. And so for me, the ultimate place is give them to share stories, but also it's a responsibility for us to reach out to these communities where there's no access, to make sure they're creators. We've done some other things with technology. We basically sometimes said, well, what, laptops in the classroom? What, mobile phones? And kind of stuff where, we use them to just push content, and we kind of have to rethink that. And that's where Simo Poppert is just being such a genius. And no, it is about constructing things, testing hypotheses, and seeing where a system fails. And ultimately, that is when we're going to have an empowered and educated and knowledgeable citizenship.
Beautiful. So well said. That's a great closing remark there. And I just want to ask one last question. Where can teachers and educators, students who are interested in pushing forward with this technology, where can we gather and assemble, find projects, talk with each other, maybe be in touch with you? And I wanted to say too, Roger's got an inside track to Maya as a personal friend here, so he might be able to connect you as the guru of maker learning for schools that can. You can always be in touch with Roger Horton. But Maya, how can we stay together and find best practices in this technology?
Yes, I mean, you can always reach me on LinkedIn and on Twitter, where I often post things, on the XREALITY Center site, where we share some of our own projects. We just did a study on VR and empathy with our researchers from the New School of Social Research. We create games. We're in the process of actually bringing more content to our website, the XREALITY Center. Digitalbodies.net is my personal space. We tend to look even further in the horizon in the space. I think that I participate in a number of different projects, such as Shaping With You at Arizona State, where we actually working on a humanized, immersive learning, and it takes humanized and immersive, and we've come up with this kind of project that is taking place. There is Ireland. Some of you, I think I was mentioned in the chat, they're going to have a conference at the end of June, and bringing lots of educators from across the globe, particularly in that context of immersive learning. So I think it's a great place to come and learn as well, and see what others are doing. And I think it's it's also like working with your students. Just give those questions back to your students and see what they come back with.
Yeah, that's the best recommendation possible. Put it into the hands of our students. Thank you so much, Maya, for a great presentation today, and thanks for fielding all these questions. And can we just ask you, if there's one best way to get a hold of you, could you type that into the chat there? And Roger, I'll pass it back to you.
So I'm going to put a couple of different links here.
Okay.
So bear with me.
Sure, fantastic. Thank you, Maya. Good. Yeah, and New School with 2 O's there for Maya's email address, and she gets that. Yeah, thank you very much, Maya, for all of that. You covered a lot of territory in the last hour, a lot to process. So just want to let everyone know that we are recording these, and we will make these available. So I encourage you to go back and check this out again if you want to go deeper, if you work and you want to bring this into your teaching practice, or share with others, or share with your children if you're a parent. These tools, many of them, as Maya and Stephen noted, are free and available on the internet. You just need a device connected to the internet. Clearly, there are equity issues we mentioned, and that's the work for all of us to find ways for this to be available to all students, all parents across this country. We all know we have a huge digital divide. But Maya and Stephen, thank you so much. So many things that were shared. Thank you, Naved, for your support. And thank you, all of you for your questions. I appreciated a lot of that. And I want to let everyone know that networking is now open. You can see the red signal there on the left. So one more chance to network. This might be the final chance of the forum. So if you haven't tried it yet, if someone's available, Elson is available networking, you can network with someone else for a couple minutes or up to 10 minutes. It's a lot of fun if you haven't tried it. So I encourage you to try that. If you haven't visited our expo booth, on the lower left-hand side of your screen, there's a bunch of material in there. I believe, Maya, did we one for the XREALITY Center? Yes. There is
we have a video, some of the things that I've just talked briefly explained, but I encourage you to get in touch. We oftentimes do welcome, and I hope that at some point in the future you get to visit us. And it will be a joy.
I've been there. It's fun to visit the XREALITY lab. But next best thing, you can visit the expo booth. Our expo booth, lower left of your screen, look for the XREALITY Center. And Maya has kindly given us a video to share with you there. So I'm going to wrap up this session with a big thank you again. Please thank Maya and Stephen for their great work. Maya, thanks for all you put into this. We're lucky to have you here today. And for everyone, we are not quite done. 3 p.m. today, the closing plenary to wrap up this amazing 3 days. They're going to ask some hard questions. What is the future of work? What is the future of our cities? Many of you are coming to us from a city. I know Maya and Steve and I are in New York City, which has been so hard hit by this crisis. But what is the future of cities and work? Huge questions in the midst of this unprecedented pandemic we're experiencing. So please join us for the final session, 3 to 4. There will be a happy hour after that. So there'll be a chance for cocktails after that from 4 to 5. And we hope you can stick around for the rest of the day. So have a great day, everyone. And we'll all be in touch soon.
Take care.
If you guys want to stay on screen for a minute or two, it's fine. That was a lot of fun. That was great.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So good.
Yeah. I'm sorry, like we've run into some bandwidth, or I don't know what it is, but I was talking, but I realized that there was some broken moments. So.
Yeah. No, it wasn't too long. It wasn't too long, and we just people come back, and Stephen had a chance to ask some questions of the audience. So yeah, it was it was great. So much to take in there. Stephen, I imagine there's a bunch of things there that are probably new to you, even though you do a lot of this work.
Oh, and I wanted to ask too, and I didn't want to burden you unnecessarily, Maya, but you mentioned so many technologies, and I was kind of trying to look them up and put the URLs in the chat, but I wonder if there's any way to follow up with kind of a laundry list of things that Maya mentioned, because I would love to follow up on this tech, and I didn't quite catch all of it.
One thing, Stephen, we're doing on the back end is we have a running list of all the resources that have been shared. So I'm going to we'll try to comb through and put that all together, and then figure out how we share that as part of the forum video and all that stuff. So that's the process. Yeah.
I may do a blog post or something that ultimately then becomes, and we oftentimes, when we actually did the World Science Festival or we did others, we'll do a summary and, toss it to our website. So, which then, Roger, you can, share and with this community. But that has been our way to kind of go back and, write sort of being able, especially with this K-12 community, which sometimes is so much more generates so much more energy. I love talking and mixing them together. I often, but it is higher education tends to be kind of on their own somewhere. Hopefully that will change.
Yeah, and I'm just really curious how. I mean, we're in this crisis, so many. So many schools are like all hands on deck to just keep it going, keep the lights on, keep students learning the basics, especially at the lower levels. So things like VR, AR maybe feel like fancy add-ons and luxuries, even before COVID-19 happened. So it'll be real interesting to see at what pace, educators pull them in as tools to use.
Yeah, no, I think that it's, you have to start somewhere. I think there's no opportunity to start, but I know that you've had some principals and administrators, and then some of those kids are, $3,000 to $5,000, and that is a good. I know because I've talked to folks, and they tell me, and I question some of the lessons plans. I think some of them could be better, which every educator I'm sure will have a take on this. But they have put it in they've done the kit. There's a suitcase. If you have a grant, if you invest this $3,000, then this ultimately becomes has become a space where, lots of schools have started because it's, even it's sanitizable, right? I know I thought this would be a question that will come up, but, just as at some point people will bring their kids back to the playgrounds and back to the parks, and, there are already, ways to do that. But I know these kids, even with perhaps their limitations, it's a place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good stuff. Maya, I want to be in touch with you. I mean, I'm completely inspired by your talk, and
that often happens.
I think I've been a little bit lazy on AR and VR because it's just been I go for the technologies that are low hanging and easy to adopt, and I've overlooked this. I think. And I'm not happy with myself about that, because you gave so many great entry points there, and so many of them are very immediately and affordably accessible to students, teachers, classrooms. So I would love to be in touch with you going forward. And Roger and I are working with so many teachers and hundreds of students in New York with multiple different cohorts every year. So it would be great to incorporate some of these things, and I'm committed to doing it.
Yeah, no, we show up. We come up to forums. We have people who've reached out to us if you're interested in even going further, co-writing a grant. All of these are options, because it's something that we actually actively are doing and doing more. And so whether it's co-hosting, whether hosting, co-writing, so all of these opportunities do exist. And I'm happy to have more conversation. And we do, at the new school, we also have been thinking a lot, which came up, I didn't kind of send it out, of actually hosting an academy around that, with me leading professional development days at some point or another. So it's interesting to kind of see a lot of that. Some of these questions were a lot about PD, essentially. Right. And it's often the case, and there isn't a very good PD around, because I'm brought into the schools for that reason. So I'm gonna have to go, but thank you so much for the opportunity, and so great to talk to you both. And of course, if I'm here today, you should thank Roger, because that story wouldn't have been possible any other way.
Great story.
That was a beautiful story you shared. Yeah.